Hey, what's up? It's your boy Tools and Things. Uh, just come out here just to give y'all some information, share about the difference between burps in your car audio system versus rebased music or music. Uh, it's to all things cool guy. That's you had requested this information, so I hope it helps. So let's start off and say burping, right? Whenever you're doing car audio and you're doing burping, burp scores, right? That's what we're talking about. Burp scores are typically used to show this is your peak SPL, sound pressure loud system, right? You want to know how much pressure you can achieve using a single frequency. So you're gonna be playing a single, you're gonna play a single unedited, unadjusted tone. So for example, you're at 40 hertz, 40 hertz with a plus or minus of 0, right? You're gonna play it typically like that. It's normally gonna be for 3-4 seconds long, and then that's it, right? Because you're pushing your whole system to see what it can perform for 3 to 4 seconds on a single tone, right? Um, what it does on that single tone gives you an example of how loud the system may sound by playing only a single frequency, not multiple frequencies, a single frequency, right? Because you have to remember when a lot of these burp score guys are competing and doing testing, what are they doing? They're building their system to perform up to a specific, well, I shouldn't say up to a specific number, but to perform on a single frequency. So you have to keep in mind their electrical alternator, batteries, wiring, right? Their amplifiers, their box, their subwoofers, the cabin, all of it has been considered in order to make sure that, hey, when it plays this frequency, everything resonates together to give me the best number possible. That's what you're doing with a burp. When you're playing on music, doesn't really matter whether it's rebased music, whether it's regular music. That's now demonstrating what your system can do on a continuous basis, right? So you're seeing what your system can perform on continuously, because when you play music, you're playing a single track, 3 minutes and more, right? So if I'm driving down the highway and I'm jamming, I'm playing my music, right? I'm going to be going song after song, track after track, right? So testing my system on music gives me a better example of how my system will perform on an overall day-to-day basis, especially for a daily driven truck, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Um, rebased music. Rebased music is normally taking mostly those older genre music that were developed before all of this new bass technology has come out, and they're removing those pretty much, I would say, non-existence bass bass tracks and putting in a more boosted bass track, right? So you're playing your system in that on something like that. Now you have to think about when you play your system on music, right? Music, you're fighting a lot more elements compared to when you're playing your system on a single tone, right? Because if I'm going to a competition and I'm going to be burping, right? I'm gonna take several factors into consideration so I can achieve the best scores possible. Because number one, I'm going to make sure my batteries are at max charge capacity. I'm going to make sure my system is cool so that when it goes to perform, it's going to perform, right? I'm going to make sure everything is tuned exactly to what it should be, so that so the box and the cabin frequency can resonate all together, right? And I'm only going to have to push my system at max capacity for 3 to 4 seconds, right? I may do that multiple times throughout the competition, but by the time I go from one to the other, I'm recharging, right? I'm cooling down. When you demonstrating your system on music, right? You're going continuously, because if I put on a track to play, typical music tracks 3 minutes and more, right? And it's going through all wide ranges of frequencies. So if I'm playing music, remember your subwoofer itself has a magnet and a coil. When a coil moves over a magnet, you generate what you call an EMF, right? When you generate that EMF is a resistive force against what you're trying to accomplish with the linear movement of your subwoofer. That means the motion of your subwoofer going up and down, or in and out, whichever you want to call it, right? That's why you hear a lot of guys talk about dampening on amplifiers. Because if you have an amplifier that has a low dampening factor, you don't have much control over that subwoofer. If you have an amplifier that has a higher dampening factor, you have better control over that subwoofer. When I say control, what does that mean? When the subwoofer extends outward, it extends, it hits the note, it stops, it goes back in, it stops, and it does that very easily and efficiently. Versus one that has no dampening or very low dampening, where it's supposed to stop here, it will sometimes excurge over more before it starts coming down. So you lose control. Losing control of your subwoofer can muddy down your bass, and you can hear it playing, and you say it doesn't sound exactly right. So again, playing on music for what you're showing will give a way better example of how best the system performs, right? Doing a burp score is more like those who are building race cars, and they take them out to the track, and that's the only time you see it, when it's on the track. Hope that helps. I'm out.